are recording. So I just wanted to continue off from last time. So just kind of recap, last time we did a couple things. Basically said there's two ways to do this assignment. You can either draw it in 2 dimensions or you can start modeling it in 3D. Did anybody try this weekend to model it? Have you started modeling, or have you started drawing? Anybody started drawing? Hopefully so. You should notice some things, right? It's a lot easier, it's a lot more accurate than analog drawing, and it's a lot more forgiving, as we know. So I just wanted to go over some of the basic steps and some of the other kind of unique tools and properties of drawing in 2D. I really appreciate it, especially if I have time to do these drawings. Because let's face it, there are some things that I don't really need to model, right? I mean, again, it's just kind of good practice. And normally we would actually do this as a separate assignment, but since it took so much time, I went ahead and just made it a part of the observation tower, right? So you either have to calculate your 2-point perspective by using your elevation and your floor plan, right, like we have here today. I'm just going to do a simple cube to just kind of prove that the operation still works and that we can still use it pretty effectively. And then some of the other commands and tools that we can use to draw that. And then secondly, I do want to continue in talking about building some of other things about this model, such as wire cut. We can manipulate a lot of things and surfaces. So again, might be a recap for some of us in computer graphics. However, might be absolutely brand new, especially if this is your first time modeling. So again, this is kind of a part 2 from last Thursday. Just to go over it, let's go ahead and do this part again. So again, this is drawing in 2 dimensions. Most of the time, I usually click on the layer that I want to use. So for like a medium line or construction line, very often I actually stay on my construction line and just kind of power through it and then change things at the end. However, for today, I do want to see the color pretty well, so we do have to stick to the same rules. So we need a couple more things. We're going to need a point, quite literally just a point. What's kind of cool is you can line up with certain things, and if this isn't on for you, it's actually known as the smart track, right? So do make sure that smart track is enabled, and I believe on Windows it's somewhere in this bottom left hand side as well. Another thing that you might notice is if your grid snap is on, it kind of gets stuck on sort of a grid system. I have mine set to really small, but as you can see, it almost stays in a grid system. If you notice your computer doing that, obviously it's because the grid is on. I kind of like the grid snap, especially when I'm doing something in grid. It is awesome to use. Or if I need to make a grid system, it's really nice to use. But again, it's just the grid snap tool at the bottom. Anyway, just wanted to explain some of those things because I don't think I covered those quite yet. So first things first, I've just went ahead and drew the floor plan of my cube and the elevation of my cube, just to kind of show what we can do with some of this drawing, and how it can actually be manipulated actually a little bit even in 2D. So I do want to show some tips and tricks as well. We'll go ahead and start drawing our lines. Well, in my case, I want to move my stationary point or my perspective plane to something a little bit more realistic, say maybe this back plane right there. That way half of it is getting projected out and a larger half is of course getting pushed back to make that happen. Next thing I want to do is set up to where I can get my vanishing points. So I'm just going to make some arbitrary lines and rotate them 45 degrees. So in my case, boom, and then of course 45 degrees. Oh, I guess it's going to go the other way. That's okay. I'm just going to go ahead and mirror that. By a rule, this is also supposed to be at a 45 degrees or at least match the same angle. One thing that I could do is take this, right, or just the lines, could move it, put it at the point in question. I could rotate it real quick, and of course be very careful about the near tool, but we can go ahead and make that line up and simply move it back to our stationary point. So not really a huge deal, but as you can see, it definitely changes where my horizon lines are. If you have a line situation like this, actually extend is the best tool. You want to click on the line that you want to extend to, I'll type in extend and then click on the line that you want extended. Not bad. I'll take those intersections. So I'm going to turn off near because that's really dangerous. And I'm going to always look for that intersection or an endpoint. So that's looking pretty sweet. And as you can see, I have my horizon line pretty good distance above our square. So we should actually start to see a diamond at the top and start to see some of those elements come about. Again, I find it a little easier, and I like kind of being sketchy with it too. You know, sometimes the lines don't go all the way to the same spot. Again, I try and give it the human air. However, this can't be said for everybody, so I will say that. I'm gonna go ahead and add some more points so I don't lose them. That's vanishing point 1. I'm gonna hit spacebar, and I can enact the same exact thing over and over again if I wanted to. Just keep hitting spacebar. Anyway, I don't really need to do that, but again, I'm just trying to show you some tips and tricks of how you can use this program faster. Just like a piano, you start to learn the scales and you start to realize that there's somewhat of a logical reason behind the instrument. Well, the same thing could be said about Rhino as well. Looking pretty good. All right, got our vanishing points. Yeah, now we just need that line taken down. So in my case, it's where it'll start to get fun. I'm gonna need all of these points. So what's nice at least about this process is I can go ahead and do them really all at the same time, as long as I'm still just, you know, not mixing up or losing track of my intersections. In our case, I'll need to extend this one. How nice is that? Perfection. Beautiful. All right, so we can just project it back to that line, right? It's almost silly that we even do it in analog, right? Especially when we have tools like extend and we have just the ability to make some lines. So again, I'm just gonna go ahead and bring these lines down. I don't even have to do that one at a time. I mean, arguably, kind of messed up there a little bit. I want it a little bit longer. Not a really big deal. I'm gonna go ahead and take a copy of it because why would I just kind of draw that over again? I'm trying to save some time. I'm maybe stuck in the middle of studio. So I definitely want to make sure, you know, that I'm getting all those intersections. And there's those 4 boxes I need, right? In our case, we need to make sure that this line particularly, right, is the one that is getting sort of shot to or projected from. Same thing could be, I mean, you could really do it on all of these, but let's go ahead and take it. So in our case, we use this back piece right there. I'm gonna go ahead and draw a circle on it because I can. I mean, why not? Circle. Can always delete it. I can even turn it really, really light and make it sort of just like a human air. Again, I kind of like when digital drawings have like this unique quality where you can't tell if it's digital, you can't really tell if a human made it. That's just the kind of style I like to go for because, again, it makes this sort of, it doesn't make a false impression of completion, which is a fancy way of saying the digital computer makes things look perfect. So I'm going to take that point, and in my case I need to go to that point, so I'll take that one down. Sweet. In my case it probably extends, and I can extend it later, not a big deal. And over here we got, did you get the right one? Yep, got the right one. Take that one. Sweet. So we do have that portion that we know is tried and true. So we know exactly what height the box is as well. So I can go ahead and take those. I guess I want to extend that as well. So another tool that's pretty nice about this is, well, you know, I got to these points, but I don't exactly know where to extend them to, right? And maybe it's not a defined position. I mean, don't get me wrong, in this case, I think it actually stops on, of course, one of these lines. But if I didn't know what that was going to do, I could use also fillet. So fillet is where it takes 2 lines and turns them into a corner or a radius. So check this out. We can actually make the radius 0, which is going to give us a perfect angle between 2 lines. So I can take this line and that line. It's of course going to find the point for us, and arguably in the same spot there. Now what did I do wrong? That one pushes back. Oh, I guess I didn't get that one. Oh wait, did I? Yeah, I did get that one. However strange. You would think that one would align with that one. Let's test something out. Oh, I get it, because I can't use the same height of this line, because it's not on that line. Anyway, I found my own mistake. But that's okay. It definitely seems like this is going to be the one that it aligns with, because, well, that's the one that it goes to. Right, of course projects this way, and of course projects that way. So I guess at least in this case, like I was saying, we do know the extend line here, so we don't really have to do that way. I just wanted to show some cool tricks. But let's go ahead and take that stationary point back and just use this intersection so you can kind of see what it does. And you start to see the box a little bit, right? Obviously we need the other intersection right here. Take that one back. And we'll go with kind of a wireframe mode real quick. And of course use those to go back. And as you can imagine, it's a much faster process than doing this by hand. And we're definitely starting to get that box. You guys see it? Let's make it a little bit more apparent. Let's say I draw in a new line type, and I'm going to go ahead and draw a polyline, just so I can get the outer shape of it very quickly. And bam, right? Obviously I'd want that layer on top. It's not going to show up over my medium lines, but it's there. Kind of maybe hard to see in the projector though. Usually if I move that, it actually, oh, that's why. Don't accidentally put your layers inside of other layers. It's just absolute trouble. However, you may, I'm kind of glad I made this mistake. If you do find yourself making a mistake and you're like, oh no, do I have to draw that all over again? Absolutely not, right? In fact, what we can press is function key F10, and that's definitely something you might want to write down. When you hit the function key F10, or on a Windows computer, I believe you can kind of just hit F10, right? It's going to turn every line that you've selected into a wireframe mode. Right, so it's going to reveal all the points and all the curves that make up that line, which is really nice because, well, if it has little points like this, I can simply select the point and only the point. You may have noticed the way that I selected that. So if I click on a line, if I go this way, like towards the left of when I'm dragging, it's going to select both of those lines because both of them are touching, right? However, if I go the other way, so towards the right, it's only going to get the objects that are completely in that box. I know it's very confusing, but AutoCAD, lots of other programs of course do it this way, and it's a pretty universal thing, but it also applies to Rhino. So I'm going to go ahead and press move, and I'm just going to move that point because I don't need to draw the whole line again. That would be silly and would waste a lot of time. So now that's that correct box, and things like that. Now don't get me wrong, I'd probably want to trim this up a little bit, so I'm going to use that outline. I'm going to hit trim and maybe get rid of some of the things that I know I don't want, like the ones going in the ground, or maybe it's I don't want to see them through the box. All right, so maybe I get rid of actually my hidden lines and things like that. Oh, looks like I maybe accidentally got rid of too much. Let's bring, oh thank goodness, there's Command Z, right? So we can do stuff like that. Another one that I like to do is break. And I think I showed you guys this one as well, but this one's a really good way to kind of just get like a little break in there, and it looks a little analog, right? There's kind of mistake there, and let's face it, it is so minusculely small. Usually the printer doesn't even get it, but it does start to maybe cause a little anomaly in the ink, which again, you'll kind of learn this over the years. We can do bigger breaks, which I'm pretty fond of too, when all the breaks aren't the same. So I'm going to type in break and click on that line, get a little bit closer, and as you can see I got pretty off. If I wanted to fix that, I could by just hitting F10. Right, so I'll hit F10 and you can see all the points come out, right? So I can move that one. If I was super OCD, I could definitely fix some things, right? But as you can see, definitely I don't have to start over in a drawing anymore or anything like that. So all right, we got a box. Not bad, not bad. So if I didn't trim these, I did want to actually show you something pretty cool that we can do. Again, with that F10 mode, let's see if it actually works today though. Usually you actually just need the points. So what you would do is you go to your filter. On the Mac, it looks like this little funnel, right? And normally it's actually about right here. I just put it next to my tab because it's a little bit easier. I put it next to my O-snap, and it's kind of an O-snap rule. So the filter itself can be hard to get used to, but if you've ever been trying to select something and you're like, crap, I accidentally got one of those lines when I just want points, right? Or maybe I don't want any points, I just want lines, right? And of course, filter is actually the way to go about that. You could select anything. So in my case, I'll select everything, those lines and those points. If I unselect curves, right, and I try and select that, it's only going to get the points. In fact, the filter will flash a little bit. I don't know if it does this actually on the Windows, but it's kind of nice because now I just have the points, right? So if I wanted to manipulate that, can you guys see what those lines are doing? It's almost real time giving us a new projection. Now, don't get me wrong, I'd still have to move the points to new intersection points. But arguably in the digital realm, even in 2D, right, I can change my vanishing point or my horizon line simply by actually just changing the horizon line. Right now I'm below it, maybe I'm the same size as that object. And to be fair, all of these are going to stay the exact same, right, because they just come from the floor plan. So again, another reason we did that all by analog was so that you could realize those same analog principles are actually even easier in the digital realm. So I really want to throw it out there, guys, that your number one solution isn't always modeling something. In fact, some things are impossible to model, like a tree. Forget about it. They're still trying to do it in 2024. Usually we just use some sort of flat thing, right? And we even apply it in Illustrator and change its line weight and maybe kind of give it some three-dimensionality. But anytime that you put an actual really good three-dimensional tree in your computer, it's going to crash your laptop anyway, right? So we do a lot of the two-dimensional things and we don't even realize it. But one thing I do want to throw out there is that you don't always have to model something and make 2D. Don't get me wrong, I love that tool and I'm about to show it actually myself. But again, look how fast we can draw that and manipulate it, especially for a studio project, to where I'm just going to print that out and trace and freehand it on it anyway, right? So again, using these tools, especially at SAC, to the best of your ability, anytime that you can start to incorporate the digital and analog, trust me, you're going to blow some people's minds because they're going to see your analog drawings and go, how did he or she do this, right? That's incredible. When they don't realize that you use actually a multitude of tools and are quite familiar with a lot of them. And trust me, that gets you hired and that gets you accepted to nice colleges. When you understand that analog drawing is a huge part of architecture that is unfortunately slowly dying away from architecture. Anyway, so there's a small demonstration. Sorry, I kind of messed everything up, so, oh, thank goodness. Edit, undo, right? They'll never have to know that I messed it all up. But again, an opportunity to really show all your work and really make a nice drawing. I mean, most people don't even do this part or show it, right? You kind of just end up with a model or something. And don't get me wrong, when people see how you made something as well, even in studio, I start to maybe actually put my floor plan up here. I actually start to put my elevations, maybe perspective is at the bottom. It even starts to be arguably a compositional board, right? That's now like being built right in front of your eyes. And let me tell you, like, clients love that stuff when they see it come from just points and lines to physical reality. And there is something special about that. Anyway, let's continue also on the modeling script. So don't get me wrong, if you've already kind of mastered two-dimensional drawing and things like that, and you're already ready for, you know, step A, or my class A is what I'm calling it, team A. You had like team A, you had varsity team. I forget what they always had in middle school, right? You know, they had the A team, the B team. Was varsity the best one, or was it A team? Varsity, right? Yeah. B team was kind of like the second. We had the same thing in band. It was honors band, symphonic band, concert band. I was definitely always in honors, but I definitely felt bad for the symphonic band. Anyway, so my A team, if you're modeling, definitely let's continue on that. And as you know, you essentially have to work in all three views or all four views. So I did want to go over, again, some more tips and tricks that we can use. I did go over this last time, but you can right click on any of the viewports, so the little top left, and you can set the view to anything, right? I mean, we can even arguably change it to a perspective, and I can show you how to do that a little bit later. Probably won't go into that today, but I do want to show you how to set up a perspective correctly also, in true dimensions. That way they won't even know if you made 2D it or actually modeled it. I mean, don't get me wrong, obviously when you see a lot of complexity, they're like, okay, maybe they did make 2D, but clearly we can even change the top to over here, right? If you didn't necessarily want it over there, another thing that you can do is make these smaller or bigger, right? Which can be extremely helpful as well. Like maybe you just want the perspective to be really big and the top to be really big. And let's face it, you might not be doing something that's always in elevation. Again, I find it to be quite unique. And especially if you have more screens, you can put all these viewports on different screens, which, I have at home. I have literally 4 screens, so I can have one viewport in each screen. Yes, that is how bad my eyes are. So you can imagine on this tiny little laptop, I'm like the whole time of these tutorials. Anyway, we make the best of it. So we left off last time with some handrails and some other tools like that. So let's refocus in, kind of a review on this one as well as the select all or zoom extents, right? So if you hover over some of these, it's zoom selected on this one. There's actually a couple of different zooms. In fact, if you just type in zoom, there's like a couple, right? Zoom in, zoom lens, zoom naked. I wonder what that is. Zoom 0 to 1. I've never used it, but now's the kind of time to try some of these things out. I mean, why not? It's not for a studio project, right? It's definitely really just one big exercise. But let's continue where we left off last time, because I do want to model this and model it correctly. So last time we went over kind of 2 different ways to make a stair. I think I ended up with basically kind of this floating stair. Okay. And as you can see, I still have my filter on. I like that it flashes like that, especially on the Mac side, because it really reminds me that it's still on. So let's go ahead and move that and go ahead and put it in a better position. So I'm going to type in move, enter. Go ahead and take that piece and I'll just line it up with here. Not a big deal, just because I can move it up in actually one of my other views. Now I can't remember if I grouped it. Oh, thank goodness. That's past Chris helping future Chris. But yeah, we can go ahead and put that at the top. Now, as you can see, I accidentally chose a different wrong point, or I accidentally skipped it like that. Again, my hands are usually by default at the Command Z. I don't know if yours are too, but it's good to be aware of what your physical body is doing as well. Now, what I did there was I held shift and just used move. That way it wouldn't accidentally like go way into the far plane or something, or accidentally on something else. Again, holding shift and playing this thing like a piano is really how it's supposed to be done. Some of the greats, I mean, they actually have 2 mouses, or they have these mice with keyboards on them. It's insane, and they'll just sit there like flying, dude. Like, and they have 2 mice. It's insane. That's like the Pixar people, the animators, people who sculpt stuff. It's even got as far as like, they have VR headsets now, and you have these pens that have like haptic feedback. It's very cool. They're also like 15 grand, so there is that. I don't know if it's going to be used in architecture anytime soon because of that. But the future of digital technology is starting to again go back to analog, right? They're going. It's just like record players and music, right? They did all these CDs and digital music, and now they're going, oh shit, what have we done? We ruined music, and we turned it into this bit rate. Let's go back, right? And honestly, architecture, in my opinion, is going to do the same thing in our lifetimes. They're going to go, this is shit. AI is producing everything, and it's producing it all wrong. Somebody still has to go in there and check it anyway. So let's just put the people in the digital realm, and I guarantee you that's what's going to solve this. It's also what Elon Musk is talking about, actually planting a chip in your brain into which you actually have an interface. I don't want to go that far. I'd rather just go into a VR room that's just like all screens. That'd be epic. Anyway, not to get off into a tangent, let's continue. One of the things I did want to show, obviously as you're modeling this out, a good rule of thumb is to go one piece at a time, right? There's nothing wrong with making it actually all these different pieces, because once we put it actually in rendered mode, and I did mention probably not to do this while screen recording, I've changed my background to back and things like that. You can change all the colors, stuff that I show in computer graphics. But you're not really going to see a separation of parts anyway. In fact, it looks pretty nice. One could argue this actually looks like a pretty decent model if I screenshot it and Photoshop it up a little bit, or print it out and draw on it. I mean, why not? Let's go back to our shaded tool though, just so I don't burn my computer up. So I do want to make these pieces one at a time. So last time I left off on that piece and getting that landing. So let's go ahead and get that. I think I drew a rectangle here. Nope, I didn't, but that's okay because I can draw another one. So I'm gonna hit rectangle. Oh, rec. I'm gonna get those points right there. That way I can get that piece. I'm gonna take that curve, I'm gonna extrude it. Let's give it some thickness, 12 inches. I'm gonna make sure that it's solid and click this box. That way, you know, it actually closes it. Actually, maybe I should show you what happens if you don't accidentally do that. So let's see, I'm gonna extrude it, 12 inches, enter. You're gonna be like, ah man, that's not a landing. I want something closed. Well, how do I close it? I can't just close curve. It's not a curve, it's a poly surface. In fact, if I didn't even know what it was, I could type in what, enter, and it'll tell me what it is, right? And in fact, in our case, it's a valid extrusion, right? It's an extrusion surface, telling me that it's not a curve, it's not a point. And again, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to test you over the vocabulary of all these different things, but it's a very good thing to get used to. Again, I'm sorry they named curves when lines are also curves. It doesn't respond to math or even physics, but in the digital realm, that is what they've called them because of a NURB and a mesh system, which I don't know if we'll actually get into. It's not super important, but technically right now we're working in NURBs. It stands for something, but I honestly don't know what it stands for. Anyway, if I did want to close this, I could do that all over again and hit solid, or I could type in cap and cap it, right? Kind of intuitive. No, it doesn't make a baseball cap, but it does, of course, cap it, right? In our case, it'll create a solid object for us. That way I can move it. Again, I wouldn't move anything without actually grabbing some sort of point that I know that it wants to hook to, right? If I just select any point in the world, I have no idea where this thing is actually going. So in my case, I might want to bring it up and actually click to another thing. I might not, right? That doesn't actually seem to fit. So maybe I take this piece, go to a different view, and see if I actually can line it to something else. Looks like I can, right? So in fact, I'll take one of those top points. I don't actually know which one it is, or I can select from one view and move it in another, which again, used to not be a thing. It's really nice that it is though. So I'm going to take that piece, I'm going to use my smart track to keep it basically in the same spot. It's picking up an apparent intersection. If you don't want it to pick up an apparent intersection, you got to turn it off. So in my case, I'm going to turn off intersection. In fact, in this case, I think I'm going to take off perpendicular, and let's just see where it goes here. Well, I guess I do need one of those points, and it is finding it for me. So that is kind of nice. And as you can see, it definitely put it in the right spot. Right, we got a landing. In our case, like I said, you don't have to be so worried about stuff like this because, let's face it, if you make 2D, you can delete the lines, right? Not a big deal, right? Obviously, just be sure that you remember to delete them, right? Another thing that we could do is we could start to chop it apart, right? We could use wire cut, one of my favorite tools of all time. Did you guys ever play with clay, like in middle school or elementary school? And the way they cut the clay, they use a piece of string and they like wire cut that clay, and they gave you like a block of the clay. The reason I like it is because wire cut essentially does the same thing, except I get to control the clay now and I get to really control the wire, right? So just in a simple case, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of ways to chop this off. Modeling wise, I could use Boolean split, I could use Boolean intersection, Boolean difference. I don't really want to go over those commands, and you might be familiar with them because of computer graphics, which is fine. But like I mentioned, even in rendered view, you're not gonna see that, right? So it's like, I mean, don't get me wrong, not everything has to be absolutely perfect for a studio model, because there's a lot that we can do in the other programs to fix it, right? Again, we don't have to be these master Pixar animation guys who are making stuff that are actually very seamless, and they spend years on those models, guys. I mean, they're not doing this in 5 weeks like we're asking to do usually for a whole building or an entire concept idea. So a couple of things. Wire cut, let's show you that first. So I'm just going to draw a line, honestly, anywhere within where I want to cut. So I'm going to bring some of these points back, make it a little easier on myself, and just get a point in there, right? Basically a line to line. Looks like I kind of messed that one up, or it found the midpoint of that line. That's kind of funny. Obviously I don't want that. I just want this point. So I'm going to take that curve. I'm going to go to my right so I just get that curve. I'm going to hit move and just move that up real quick. Don't get me wrong, I probably should have just made a new line, but kind of overkill on that one. But I want to take this curve, I want to wire cut, and now it's going to ask me, hey, what object do you want to wire cut? I'm going to be like, not that one, but that one, and maybe actually even both. I could cut both if I wanted to. Like I said, we can decide the clay and the wire. So in my case, I'm going to hit spacebar, and it's going to go, okay, well, how far do you want this to go through this piece or to cut off, right? I want to cut off this little piece, so I'm going to make sure that I go far surpassed it. And in my case, it's asking, okay, well, how far do you want this wire cut of a rectangle to go through now? Well, I want to make sure that it goes all the way through so that I can get rid of it. So I'm going to hit it, and it's going to go, hey, is this the piece you're talking about? I'm going to be like, hell yeah. I'm going to hit enter, and it's gone. It's been wire cut just like the clay through the wire, right? Now, you can actually have some options to keep it. Like, don't get me wrong, you can like wire cut stuff and like keep those pieces. You can 3D print all of them and then like make really cool 3-dimensional puzzles, but not why we're here today. Obviously, we're using that to sculpt this out a little bit more, right? To get that landing a little bit better and to make it look a little bit nicer. Obviously, I can continue, and we have a pretty similar situation here. Don't get me wrong, I think actually this one's just maybe in the wrong spot. Probably is. I'd want to double check though in my elevation. Yep, definitely looks like it's in the wrong spot. So let's go ahead and move it. And another thing that I can do is I can select anywhere in my movement, and I could type something like 6 inches, right? I don't necessarily always have to move it by some arbitrary distance or anything like that. I can hold shift and of course make sure that it's only going up. Double check it. Oh, okay, that's looking pretty good. Maybe I don't need actually this step. So in my case, I can take this group, I can type in ungroup, and get rid of one of maybe the pieces that I don't need, right? In this case, it's probably that guy. However, if I chop this off, it's gonna look kind of weird. So I don't know, maybe I want to extend that, or not sure. I mean, a couple things that we could do. I could get kind of fancy with the design and say extrude surface. So don't get me wrong, there's a lot of extrudes here. There's extrude curve, extrude mesh, extrude or extract surface. That's pretty cool if I want to take that surface. Obviously, a lot of the key clues to these commands are really in the word itself. All right, so in my case, I'm going to go with extrude surface. And usually you can kind of get it as long as you can spell correctly, unlike myself today. And most of the time they are abbreviated. The surface thing is pretty cool because if I did want to take something out a little bit more and line it up to a point, I definitely can. And arguably I can join those. Oh, it won't let me join them just as like separate objects. However, maybe I do show you this after all. You can of course boolean 2 objects together. I don't know why it's called boo. Maybe it was inspired by a ghost, but usually I just type in boo, like B-O or B-O-O, and eventually all these commands come up. Obviously, if I put 2 of those devices together, now in my case, it doesn't look like it was a closed box, and that's maybe why it's giving me some issues. So don't get me wrong, modeling is a little bit on the A team for a reason. We have to be a little bit more aware of really what's going on in the model. So in my case, I needed a closed box first, so I need to cap it. So I'll take that cap, take that piece, and of course try boolean 2 objects again, or in my case, boolean union. That's another way to, of course, put 2 objects together. And as you can see, it immediately comes together into one object, and it keeps those lines there as well. However, in my rendered view, it well, it kind of is there. Oh, and it's because it's actually the curve that, it's not actually on the So if I delete that piece, yeah, it's not actually there. That was actually the curved line. So kind of a false advertisement there. Another thing that we can do is we can go to the properties of any object that we click on. So if you click on something, you can immediately go to the properties of it. Now your properties might be in a different spot. In fact, mine even seems kind of rambunctious. Usually there's a particular icon, and it has escaped me. Well, I'm in the rendering view, but I don't need rendering. Looks like some of my tabs are open, and to be fair, I honestly just can't even see these today. However, one thing that you can do is, of course, remove ISO curves from just about any object. So let's go ahead and find our properties. Yeah, usually it's this little color wheel guy. So when you click on something, it gives you all the attributes of this, and in this case, we can show ISO curves and uncheck that box. And it's going to get rid of some of those weird squares that you see usually on some of these objects when we make them. However, another thing that can be said, just because, well, now that I taught you wire cut, we can continue to further develop, some of the drawing, or maybe even the model of the object. So in my case, that's kind of a very stark wall, and I want to cut a giant circle through it. I mean, why not? It's for the sake of tutorial. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that there's a circle somewhere on the outside of this. If I don't know where it is, I can click on the viewport itself, zoom extents. Oh, there it is, way over there. So I'm going to put it a little bit closer to the object. I have it facing the wrong direction, so I'm going to move it a little bit. That's where you start to think in 3 dimensions, right, for sure. But we can go ahead and wire cut that. So move it a little bit more, wire cut. I'm going to select my wall in this case. I'm going to make sure it goes straight through the wall. And it's going to be like, hey, do you mean this one? And this is where I meant you can invert the selection. Like maybe you wanted to get rid of everything but the other piece of clay. Anyway, you definitely have some options there. But as you can see, modeling this guy and making it a little bit extra is not a hard task, right? Arguably, we can even start to get fancy and start sort of connecting these, and again, just further making the excitement of the architectural modeling process, right? For instance, I could take this surface, I can extrude surface, take this one right here. Oh, I don't want that one. So I can hold actually my control bar. I can hold shift actually as well. So if I wanted to do this multiple times, and I don't know, really start to give it a character of, my first question is, how is this stair even possible if it's not connected to anything? So I'm gonna connect some of the stairs. I mean, why not? Make it appear like some of them are connected. That's kind of cool. Arguably, I can make one into like a, I don't know, like a bridge into another spot. A diving board into a pool. There you go. I just put a pool down there. So again, there's a lot we can do with just extruding the surfaces. Maybe we want to continue actually some of the walls. So again, extrude surface. Oh, got my cap on. Take those pieces, and of course I can continue them, and I can make sure to click solid so I don't have to cap things all the time, and of course continue that wall. So again, I know I'm throwing a lot of different things at us, but hopefully this part 2 actually answers some questions, right? Or at least gives some more ideas of how you can start to model and manipulate some of the 3-dimensional qualities, right? So as you can see, not a huge deal that it's red or even a different shape. Again, I can just select these 2 pieces and Boolean union them, and it's even going to change it actually to the same layer as the original. So again, not bad. Let's see what that looks like in a rendered view. And then last but not least, I do want to show you how to start setting up the perspective of this. But maybe we actually wait until Wednesday or Thursday on that one. I don't know, we are already 40 minutes in and I got about 5 minutes left. That's starting to look pretty cool. Got the diving board. That would be actually not a bad idea, I mean, shoot, dive in that. And I'm going to make my computer freeze. So I'm going to switch that to shaded. But as you can see, a lot of potential and a lot of opportunity with this program. Clearly, I'd want to continue the stairs and finish the rest of the project. But for some of this, your designs, you know it like the back of your hand now. You've been working on it for 5 weeks. So some of this, you might be a little bit more intuitive to change it a little bit here, now that you can see it kind of in 3 dimensions, especially if you're going in this 3-dimensional route. Last but not least, let's set up a 3-dimensional view. So it gets a little crazy. Well, let's at least bring it up, right? Just in case you guys are far and you want to get started, and you've already done modeling, which I very much doubt, but I don't know. There's always someone who's really good at modeling. Let's go ahead and type in camera, hit enter, and show your camera, and you'll immediately notice that, oh, look, it's that cone of vision that we're always talking about. Well, this is the actual exact same cone of vision that you are always calculating in a 2-dimensional drawing. Here's our stationary point, and you'll notice when I change my stationary point, it changes my perspective view, right? All in real live time. If I get closer to the object, oh, it looks like I'm getting closer to the object. Right? In my case right now, the camera is actually focused on whatever I clicked on last, but as you can see, this begins to be like the animation style of, you know, something out of Spider-Man, right? Going over a building or something like that. Don't get me wrong, you could even get into animation. Here's our vanishing points, right? So we have another point we could work with, and it's actually going to control that perspective plane, right? If my perspective plane is bigger, well, I guess I can zoom out a little bit. Obviously, if my perspective is, the vanishing points are way too far out, obviously it looks very dramatic. But the point is I can manipulate the cone very easily, but I would not have known what the cone actually does unless I did it by analog. So what's kind of nice about this is I can even kind of set up the view itself, kind of just knowing how to fly around in the perspective viewport. Right, I could dial it in maybe a little bit. For instance, you know, that's looking pretty good, you know, as my sort of initial setup of this particular model, right? Then I could actually go into my top floor and start to dial it in a little bit more, right? Another thing to be aware of is that even the viewport itself and the camera, right, is and has its own properties, right? I can click on the camera, if you will, and move it, right? But the camera itself also has properties, and we can change it into a 2-point perspective and into its own perspective in general. So in my case, I'm going to right click on the viewport. I'm going to go to set view and make sure that my named views is open, or I could just switch it to a 2-point perspective just to kind of see what that does. And I actually already have this open, so I have my environments. Basically, I'll be looking for a little camera over here. I may already have it open, but let's see. It said I had it opened. Set view, yeah, it says I have my name views. Oh, there it is. So I have some from previously. I'm going to go ahead and delete those. So in my case, just hit delete, delete. And what I want to do is actually save this view, right? That way it's a little bit easier to produce. Right, so in my case, I kind of want, I don't know, maybe kind of a top thing going on. So let's take a look at it in elevation. Okay, yeah, it's significantly above the piece. Right, so maybe significantly above. Maybe dial that in a little bit more. That way it fits basically on this page. And it's starting to look like a pretty good 2-point perspective. If I wanted it to be a little bit more dramatic, I could. If I wasn't locked on to anything. Oh yeah, I forgot I have 2 tops. And as you can see, it's stuck in that 2-point perspective. Not a big deal. We'll have to change it by the number itself. Not really something I wanted to get into today, but again, this should be enough to start setting up and start taking a look at that 2-point perspective. I guess lastly, we can save it. That way I can keep it forever. Basically, I'll go to set camera. Oh, wait. Actually, I'll just go to this view. Especially on the Mac, I'll just hit the plus sign. So in my case, I can't see it. There it is. So 2-point perspective, and actually you can name it whatever you want. But what's nice is, well, if I accidentally move that, right, or accidentally displace it or really unproject it, I can double click on this guy and it forms it right back into place. So I'll definitely leave it like that for today, as you can imagine. Oh, last but not least, I wanted to go over some of the printing stuff in Illustrator. So switching gears a little bit, and hopefully I have my previous drawing. So the reason for this is obviously because I want to see your exercise 5 tomorrow. So one of the things to bring up is, well, it's a vector file. You'll notice if I zoom into this thing, it never really gets pixelated. Have you guys noticed that? They actually get like rounded, right? Or they just kind of get like bigger lines. Don't get me wrong, we're looking at it minusculely, right? We'll never see actually this much detail on the piece of paper. And arguably you'll never see that overlap either, right? I mean, how could you? It's like in the line, right? But that's because of the vector system that it works with. Now, Photoshop is not a vector system, right? It works on a rasterized system. So different file types can be used because of that file system, whether it be rastered or vectored. Now, what's kind of nice about Illustrator is that it handles vectors and rastered programs, whereas Photoshop really is just only good at rastering. So one thing I did want to mention before you print tomorrow, and really just kind of a good thing, good word of practice to have, is when saving, go ahead and export it, right? And save it as a particular image. However, you could also just save it as a PDF, but there's also certain PDFs to use. So in my case, I want to save it to my computer. I'm going to go ahead and choose, instead of an Adobe Illustrator, I'm going to choose a PDF. Right, in my case, it's just kind of a test file. I'm going to go ahead and hit save, but I'm going to realize there's a couple of options actually in here first. In fact, one of the best things to do for Studio is a high quality print. As you can imagine, it fixes actually already preset settings to be your highest quality. Now, what if I'm actually sending this document to somebody else and I know that I can't send a document over 25 megabytes? Well, I'm going to choose the smallest file size, or smallest file size just regularly. Press quality even is okay to get that better file size. This becomes really in handy, especially when I'm making a composition board or a portfolio. Right? I don't always need a high resolution image, and in fact arguably there's not a huge difference really between these except really that file type, but mess around with it because you definitely want a high quality print for Studio and graphics rather than a low quality print. So I'll go ahead and save that PDF and see what it produces. Go ahead and minimize and PDFs. Test file, and sweet. If we go ahead and zoom in on it, as you can imagine, it is crystal clear, no pixelation whatsoever. It's beautiful. I mean, maybe in the fact that it loads a little bit, sure, but it is absolutely crisp. It doesn't matter how much I zoom in. In fact, this is the most I can zoom in and it is still not pixelated. Trust me, us professors, we can tell when you've used Illustrator versus Photoshop, right? Never do lines in Photoshop, period. If you got to write it down, but never do lines in Photoshop. Obviously, we'll talk about that a little bit later once we get to Photoshop and a little bit of photorealistic rendering, but I did want to cover that for printing tomorrow. Last but not least is definitely use this guy for the printer situation. However, I've been told that as long as you actually sign on to the C, and that is the one that is on the screen, you can't technically accidentally sign to the one without a signature. That one is not connected to any printer. Right? So one thing to make sure is that you're on the NLC 502C student. Right? Otherwise, you won't be able to print, and you'll notice that the printer isn't even connected to the computer. Right? Other than that, is there anybody who's never printed here? I'd imagine you probably already have for Studio. Haven't printed anything yet. Oh, you printed something. Yeah, and it's the same process, right? Obviously, you'll want to open it up in Adobe Acrobat and then print that PDF. Never open, say like your AI file in an Illustrator thing over here and then printing from Illustrator. It's usually kind of a no-go because it does different compression per different computers, and you want the compression of that Illustrator file. That way that you can do a high quality print versus a press quality, right? And it's just kind of a good rule of thumb because, to be honest with you, at Texas Tech or U of H or even, I don't know about UTSA, but they have their own print lab and you never even get to touch a printer. Usually they want you to give a high quality PDF so that they can print it on their Adobe systems, right? So it's kind of a good habit to get into, is to always make a PDF and to take a look at that PDF to kind of proofread it, copy it, zoom into it all the way to see, is it pixelated, is it not pixelated? Because usually that PDF will tell you exactly what it's going to look like when it prints out. Any questions about Rhino, 2D, 3D? All about the printing? Or yeah? Technically you can, but check it out, right? Because when you zoom in onto it, you're going to notice that it's pixelated, right? And that's because it's not a vector coding. All right, this actually gets into computer science and is much more about code, right? One is a Cartesian grid plane, where actually what we're doing right here is actually much more of a calculation. It's just looking at a line of code and going, okay, produce black from here to here, right? So it's actually always changing that scale. Not to get too specific with it, but yeah, you'll definitely want to save it as a PDF, right? If you don't have Illustrator, do you not have Illustrator?
Yeah,
Oh, you just don't have a PDF, like opening it. Cute PDF Writer if you have Windows. So you can write this down. It's a free PDF tool. Cute as in, wow, Hello Kitty is cute, right? PDF Writer as in Jim Morrison was a great writer. It's free, and you can use it as a PDF tool and exporting tool, just in case you don't have Adobe or your Adobe isn't working. Unfortunately on the Mac, there's not a cute PDF writer, or I've never found a free tool for the Mac side. Even though Preview actually has plenty of options. You should be able to open anything in Preview. Preview is like the Adobe Acrobat for Mac. If you're kind of new to Mac, or maybe you're like, oh, I don't have Adobe Acrobat on my Mac. Well, you have something better. It's called Preview, and it comes installed on your Mac, right? So, good questions. Anything else? Yes, sir. On the modeling part? Shade and shadow. So calculating it out. Sure. Let me go over to my file. Are you like able to double click on this text and be able to edit it and things like that, or what is it that you're trying to do? Are you trying to maybe flip it, or you should be able to use Gumball on it, or if you double click on it, you can, I mean, don't get me wrong, mine's in feet right now, so obviously I wouldn't want to change those numbers too badly. I could hold shift on some of these elements and change it. If that's not working though, Brajan, another thing that I can do is explode this document. However, now I can't change it. So if I explode this, it creates an outline for me, and you can kind of see what it does to some of the letters, right? Obviously, maybe not the best font to do this, right? But what's nice is now I can manipulate this a lot differently, and I can even rotate it, stuff like that. so I can turn it into an object as well. I don't know if that's helpful, but just kind of wanted to get that in video as well. What is it that you're exactly trying to do though? Just make it smaller? Were you able to do it? Sweet, sweet. Problem solved. And a great question, because again, somebody might have that exact same question. Oh, wait, how do you make the text smaller? Said there was 2 ways. I can double click on it and change it physically, or quite literally just gumball it. Great questions. Anything else, guys? All right. Well, we'll go ahead and leave the recording for there. Hopefully I got the mic going. I'll double check it.